this can't be happening. Like, what can I do to make this not be happening?
Thank you, Megan, for coming and visiting with me today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your interests, hobbies, work, etc.?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm a mom. I have 4 beautiful kids, and they keep me busy. I like kids. I've spent a lot of time with kids over the years, from working with daycare and preschool to working in the library at my kids' elementary, serving in the PTA, and I spent a lot of time in my church calling in Young Women's. I think I've served in Young Women's for about 7 years in different capacities, and I love it. Yeah.
Awesome. So will you share your journey to getting pregnant with your 4th child?
Yeah. So I have 3 girls, and my youngest girl, the 3rd child, she was difficult to get. It's kind of strange. Like, my first 2, I wasn't trying to get pregnant, and I just was. It almost seemed easy, and then when we decided that we wanted another child, it became difficult. We had a couple of losses before her, and then while I was pregnant with her, we discovered that I had a genetic blood disease called thalassemia, and I had to have a lot of blood transfusions during that pregnancy. I was very sick, very fatigued, and then we had her, and she's our redhead, and she's wild, and she's been feisty from the beginning, and we thought, okay, this is it. That was difficult for us, and the whole process of getting pregnant with her and getting her here was difficult, and we thought, we're happy, we're good. And a few years went by, and we, you just have this feeling like there's someone missing. Like, I would round up the kids and I'd be going to count an extra head, and they weren't there, and I thought, what does this mean, And we fasted and prayed and decided that there was another spirit that was meant to be in our family. And we began trying, and we experienced loss after loss. We had 4 miscarriages, and then there was just a long period where we weren't able to get pregnant at all, and I don't know why, but that was really hard, and I think it was harder than before, than my other losses, just because my girls had become old enough to understand what was happening, and so they were experiencing those losses with me. It's really hard to have your children be so excited for something, and then to have to explain to them what had occurred, and that those babies were meant to stay with Heavenly Father for a bit longer. So yeah, that was really hard. At some point I saw so many different doctors during all that time. I changed OBGYNs a whole bunch, trying to figure out what was going on, and sometimes just because that doctor, when I had experienced a miscarriage, sometimes they're kind of insensitive. And I don't think they mean to be, or they recognize that. It's just that in their profession, they look at things a little differently. And so I remember a loss that I had where the doctor was trying to comfort me by saying, oh, at least you weren't very far along, or we'll need to test that tissue. And I don't know, just to have your baby referred to as that and your loss diminished as oh, you weren't that far along. And I don't know, I experienced a lot of that with friends and neighbors too, and I've come to learn over the years that people are well intentioned. They want to help you, they want to be there for you, but sometimes if they haven't experienced that loss, they don't know where your heart's at and how to reach it. And when they say things like, at least you weren't that far along, or at least you have other children, I think that term, at least, really takes away from what you're going through. And it made me feel like I wasn't allowed to be sad or process what I was feeling, because at least I hadn't gone through something as horrible as somebody else. But no matter how far along you are, that's a child. That's a spirit that will always be with you. So we found a new doctor, and they recommended that we try a medication to help sustain the pregnancy. And so we began that process, and that was crazy. Like, my emotions on that medication were all over the place. I remember feeling angry and like, let's just make it past this. And but we were able to get pregnant, and I was going in like twice a week for progesterone testing to make sure that my levels were increasing, and that would prove that my pregnancy was viable. And we were getting excited because those numbers were increasing a lot, and that was a really good sign. And when I was 6 weeks along, we went in for our first ultrasound, and we had no reason to believe that there was anything wrong. And I don't know, when you wait for something for so long, we were pretty excited. And the doctor took a look and told us that there was no visible anything. There was no fetal pole, there was no egg, there was no heartbeat, and I just felt so defeated. Like, again, why? And I remember she walked over to this cupboard, and she came back with these pamphlets on loss. And she had told me we must have had what was called a missed miscarriage. And she said that we needed to go to the front desk and schedule a D&C. And I kept thinking, like, I still feel pregnant. Like, I know my body by now. I have been through so much, and I know what it feels like to have that loss. I know the symptoms, the sickness, the aching, like, I know what that feels like. And I feel pregnant. I feel healthy. I feel like I was full, like I had that spirit within me. And we walked out of the doctor's office, and I just saw this room full of, the lobby full of these pregnant women, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't schedule to have my baby removed from me, at least not right now in front of all these women while I'm feeling so emotional. And we walked out, my husband and I walked out to our car, and we started driving, and I just leaned my head against the window, and the tears were just coming, and I thought to myself, what's it's kind of embarrassing, but I just kind of reasoned with Heavenly Father, and I said that this can't be happening. Like, what can I do to make this not be happening? Can I make a deal? Can I, I think we always try and figure out what we can sacrifice to make things different or right or how we want them to be. And I just had this instant prompting, get a second opinion. And I thought that was interesting because, we don't question our doctors. We just go along with whatever they say. They're right. They know more than we know, right? But again, I heard that, get a second opinion. And so I immediately got on the phone. My husband's probably thinking I was crazy at this point. And I started calling around, and I got in to another doctor, and the appointment was scheduled for a week and a half away. And I thought, oh, that's a long time. It feels like a long time when you're waiting to find out. And but I kind of felt okay with that. Like, I thought, okay, I'm not gonna make any other choices until I've had this second opinion. And about half a week went by. It's not very long, but half a week went by, and I started going crazy. Like, I started doubting myself. Like, am I being ridiculous to not believe this doctor? Am I being ridiculous to drag my family through this small sliver of hope? And my friend reached out and said, maybe you need a blessing. And so I had a close friend come, and he helped my husband give me a blessing. And I think that was the singular, most amazing experience that I've had within that whole trial, was that blessing. And what's interesting is I don't remember what was said. And I don't think I was listening. I think that blessing opened a gateway for me to communicate with my Heavenly Father, and that spirit just poured in. So during this blessing, I kind of felt this quiet calm wash over me, and I realized that instead of trying to make a deal with Heavenly Father, that I needed to submit, that I needed to trust Him. And so I remember telling Him that no matter what happened, that I would keep trying, that I would trust that what He revealed to me in that when we fasted and prayed, and He revealed that we were meant to have another spirit in our home, I would trust that no matter what, and I would keep trying. And that was really hard, because when you've been through so many losses, it's scary to keep trying. It's scary to think of having to go through that again. But I knew that I needed to do that. I needed to let him know, or even just myself, that I trusted him. And I felt so much peace with that. And I just kind of let that go. Like the whole rest of that time that I waited for that appointment, I was okay. And whatever happened would happen. I didn't have any expectations. I didn't have any fears. I knew everything would be okay.
So what happened at that appointment?
Okay. So, the day of the appointment came, and my husband had already taken plenty enough time off of work for all the other things that we've been through that year, and so he wasn't able to come with me. And honestly, I think that he just expected the same news that we'd already received. When you hear that so often, you just expect it. Like I said, we trust the doctors, right? They know more than we do, supposedly. But I didn't want to be alone. I really didn't want to be alone. And so I invited my husband's mom to come with me. And I'm so grateful I did. It was good to have support there. But I was laying on that table and waiting for the doctor. And at that moment, I started to have a little bit of doubt. And I started to think, okay, how do I prepare myself for this bad news? How do I prepare myself to move forward? And I felt that again, to just be calm, that everything would be okay. And the doctor came in, and she, worked her magic, and all of a sudden we could just hear this thumping, the heartbeat, and she's like, "Oh, there's your baby," and I about lost it. I don't know if it was like a combination of pain and joy and relief and just gratitude. I don't think I've ever felt gratitude as heavy as that. Knowing that I trusted in my Heavenly Father and that He did hear me. I called my husband, and I was crying, so of course he thought that that was bad news, that, what he had expected, what had come to be, and I said, "Listen," and I put him on speakerphone, and he could hear the baby's heartbeat, and I said, "That's your baby. We're gonna be okay." And that was such an incredible day. I'm very grateful.
How did your husband respond?
He was emotional. He's kind of an emotional guy. He's sensitive, and he was happy.
And how did your family respond?
They were happy too. My mother-in-law that was there with me, she was crying with me. She was so supportive and loving, and I think it was meant to be, to share that moment with her, and to see that love come from her meant a lot to me. I remember my oldest, Lily, just crying and holding me, and she was really happy, but I think she was also like, how happy do I allow myself to be?
Guarded.
they'd experienced those other losses with me. So,
But you felt from that point that this pregnancy was going to be okay, or were you still worried?
I think it's impossible to not be worried. I spent the entire pregnancy worried, but I felt okay. Like, I felt like every time I would be worried or start to doubt or anything, I would remind myself of that gift. So of course there was fear, there was worry that every little hiccup or whatnot would result in a loss. But I think more so than that was the trust, the being able to rely on the fact that I had trusted him and he had said things would be okay, and that if I just kept leaning on that, that everything would be okay. So the rest of the pregnancy, it was rough. I had a lot of blood transfusions, just like with my daughter. And I remember one of them I had to have within a day or two of each other. So I received like 4 units of blood in a span of 2 or 3 days. But so what's interesting is that when you are blessed like that after loss and you receive that blessing of being able to be pregnant, it's like you chastise yourself the whole time. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, I can't complain. Oh, I'm in pain. Oh, I can't complain. But really, I mean, we're human and we still have those emotions and thoughts and feelings, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you don't appreciate the blessing that you have, that you're not still extremely grateful for that gift that you've been given. So we decided that our little guy was going to be our last. And I had always wanted to do a natural childbirth. And I had, again, with the trusting your doctors and things, I'd been told in the past that with my blood disorder that it wasn't safe to have a natural childbirth, that I needed to be in the hospital and I needed to have things controlled. And I remember thinking, I've come this far. I can do whatever I want to do. I'm capable. And so, yeah, I went into labor on my own, which is a first for me. All of my girls I was induced with, and those were kind of hard, intense labors. This one was hard too. So I hear all these stories of how amazing and I felt so empowered. These women share these natural birth stories that make them sound like, Xena, warrior princess, and it was hard. I think because my body had been through so much that it was just hard. But there were like so many small miracles and things throughout that delivery that I'll never forget. I had a doula, and she's one of my closest friends, and she was so supportive, and she just every day, you can do this, you can do hard things. Your body was made to do this. And I believed it, you hear that so many times and you start to believe that. And I had a husband who is amazing. I can't tell you how grateful I am for him and for his role in the birth of our child. He held me, he let me feel whatever I felt without guilt or shame or and I had an unexpected guest with us during our birth. So I have a complicated childhood. And I have a stepmom, and we struggled a lot when I was growing up. And I think I always believed that she didn't love me the way that a real mom would. And during this birth, I was able to see her differently. I remember feeling nervous that she would be in there. I'd never had anyone in the room with me and my husband before. I'm a very private person, and with this one I was just so tired and like, oh, it's my last, and I had this thought that, you know, how would it be to just be done having kids and never get to see that miracle of childbirth again? There's something so sacred and special about being in that room. And so I let her be there, and the whole time she would try to make me laugh, she would, you know, and so at some point I actually was a little bit annoyed. I'm like, oh, I just want to be in pain, and I just want to, and so there was this moment when I was getting ready to push, and I was in a lot of pain, and I looked up, and my mom, her eyes were just full of tears, and she, like, I remember feeling like, this woman loves me, and it's hard for her to see her child in pain. And that was huge for me, to see her like that, and to feel that from her. And then I delivered my boy. I was ready, and the doctor walked in, and my doula looked at me, and I looked at her like panic, like I'm ready, and and the doctor's still washing up, and she looks at me and she says, "The doctor's in the room, go ahead." And so I, you know, pushed him out with one push, and my water broke as I pushed him out, and I remember hearing him cry, and I remember, you know, I had expected this feeling of like overwhelming joy, and but all I felt was relief. Like, I'm sure there was joy behind that. I'm sure there was, but in that exact moment, I just felt like I did it. He's here. I don't have to wait anymore. I don't have to worry. He's here. And the joy came later. It did, I promise it did. But I think in that moment I was happy it was done. I was happy that, like, I just had that knowledge that I wouldn't have to go through that pain, that loss anymore. And I could see that reflected in my husband's eyes.
So what do you feel like you conquered or learned about yourself through this journey?
I feel like I learned that I'm capable of hard things. I learned that I do have faith. I think that was the greatest lesson for me, is just to trust. Not just in Heavenly Father, but in myself. I think I struggle with that a lot. I think I am constantly doubting myself, doubting what I can do, not listening to what I know to be true. Because, you know, we're surrounded by this bubble, this society that tells you that you should feel guilty for feeling good about yourself, for feeling any sort of confidence, or for achieving anything great for yourself, and recognizing that. Even just talking to you now, like this has been so hard. You asked me so long ago, and I just keep putting it off because I've told myself that my story isn't important because my grief may not be as hard as other people's, but it's important to feel what you're feeling. And our trials, they are uniquely shaped for each of us. And I know that for me, I needed to have that faith, that trial of faith, to be able to trust.
I think it's amazing that you were in tune and listened and relied on that over and over. I think that shows a lot of strength. So my last question for you is, how has this blessed your life?
I have to ask that a lot because my little guy is now 5 and he's wild. He's a little crazy, and so I have to remind myself often that he is a blessing. And I see all the joy that my kids have with him. They get to experience childhood a little bit longer because they have him to see things through his eyes. And I know for me, when I see him, I'm reminded of that faith. I feel blessed every time I see my son. Every time I see him being happy, enjoying life. I mean, he's hard. He is 5. And he's not the easiest, but he loves so much. He will be the first one to hug you and tell you he loves you, even if you're a stranger. I'm working on that. The stranger danger he hasn't learned yet, but I think that is a gift from Heavenly Father that he knew I needed, that we all needed, this little spirit that could just love the way that Grant loves. And I think that he is a blessing because when I look at him, I'm reminded of that gift of gratitude that I felt during that blessing. And I'm reminded to hold that gratitude with me every day, and that as long as I have that, I can do hard things. I can recognize small blessings in everyday moments. And that's what carries us through, right? That's where we find our joy, is in those little blessings all along the way.